everybody. My name is Anne Desjardins. I'm your host here for the Silver Lyming, and I am so happy to be here to share more information with you about Lyme and tick-borne illness to help just spread hope as well that you can heal from this insidious sickness. It is possible. It might take acts of God, which it surely does many times, to recover and regain your sense of well-being, but it is completely possible. And if you're familiar with my show, you know now I'm up to about, I think this will be somewhere in the 50s for my episodes. And you can hear all the past guests that I've had on the show, just their different stories. A lot of them have some very similar parallels in that many people find it useful to heal not only on a physical level, but also on an emotional and a spiritual level. All of those components, I think, are very important to acknowledge and pay attention to when you're working with yourself to heal from this type of sickness. Again, especially if it's gone more chronic, it just takes a little bit more elbow grease to get out of the system. And I think something else that maybe people are starting to realize through my episodes is that this is something that affects people worldwide. This is not just an epidemic that's happening in the United States. This is something on a global level. And what I've learned is basically if you think about the middle green belt of the globe, that's really going to be more of your hot spots for ticks because it is more of an environment conducive to their survival. It has wet, they need dampness, they need moisture to live. They do well when something has all the different seasons because the leaf litter falls, it gives them the space to hang out and um, thrive or survive over the winter. There's definitely enough food for them to eat off of. And as we know, through potentially climate change, depends on where you stand on your beliefs with that, but the band is widening in which the ticks we're finding them. So they're heading more north, more south through the globe. I talked to people in Canada. A lot of my coworkers live up there, and it wasn't really something they had to talk a lot about, but in the last few years, it's really become much more rampant, and they are seeing a lot more cases of it. And so again, be aware that this is not just something for the United States. And my guest today is also going to help heighten that. She's coming from Ireland, and I'm really excited to have her here to share with us and talk to us a little bit more about what she's gone through because she's really made a stance for herself with Lyme disease and combining it with her skill set. She's a television and film actress. She's put together a film called Warrior about Lyme and tick-borne illness. It's the story of a girl named Jenny and what she's gone through. And it's really beautiful. I connected with my guest, Katie, through social media. Of course, we don't really live down the street from each other. I'm here in Pennsylvania and she's over the seas there. And we've really followed each other's journey through social media. And it's been very beautiful to see her growth and development as she's gone through this and really again what she's turning this into and her silver lining in a sense of her experience with Lyme and tick-borne illness. So I'd really love to welcome you here, Katie, and I'm so grateful for you to be here. I see you on social media as Katie Maguire, and so I see your other name here. I'm not sure. I apologize if this is your maiden name that you have on the screen, and then Maguire is your married name. I think that's probably the way, or am I backwards? Which one is which?
Yeah, it's the opposite. Yeah. So Maguire is my maiden name, and
Thank you.
Ozil Kaya is my marriage name. I'm
Thank
married
you.
to a Latvian man, so yeah.
I was wondering what that was as well. Thanks. That would make sense, and obviously that I should know that that was your maiden name there with the Irish. But um, at any rate, I'm very grateful to have you join me here today. And if you don't mind, if you could share with us a little bit more about your story and how you became involved in the world of Lyme and tick-borne illness, please.
Yeah, so I suppose like my story starts like, a long time ago. Probably like back in like 2008, 2009. And really for me, like that was when I got a bite, like a tick bite. Well, probably like 2007, 2008. But I wasn't aware, like, as in I don't remember being bit. I didn't get, the typical bullseye rash or have any kind of reaction to it at all. Um, but it wasn't until my 21st birthday, a couple of weeks before that, I had broken my wrist. And then it appeared that after I broke the wrist, my immune system was kind of down and working towards like healing that. And literally like the day after my 21st birthday, I went to bed that night just like, a happy, quite a carefree, wild, young woman. And then just woke up like the next day, and I had like all the swollen glands, stiff neck, flu-like symptoms. And to be fair, I did think like, look, it's probably a hangover. I probably partied a bit too hard. And yeah, I went into that was kind of like the start of like an 11-year journey before I would get diagnosed. So when I got sick that time, I did go to the doctors. I went to the doctors actually in university in Dublin. And they said essentially I had some sort of a virus, maybe like mono or something like that, or like glandular fever, I think as we say here. So this kind of just ended up going on and on, like I would get a little bit better. I'd get some antibiotics, maybe I'd improve. And then, 2 or 3 weeks after I'd finish a course of antibiotics, the same thing again, or it could be completely different symptoms, so it could be kidney infections, like respiratory infections, ear infections, like everything and anything that you could get, you know what I mean? I would pick it up. And I just couldn't, like I couldn't fully get better.
Yeah.
So that kind of went on, like there was kind of a year to a year and a half period, say from just after my 21st until I kind of turned like around 20, well, it's about 23. And like I was really bad. Like there was probably like 8 or 9 months where I was literally just in bed, like all the time. Like I had dreadful fatigue, like sick to my stomach, like I could hardly eat. Just I might have the odd day where I'd be able to like get up, have a shower, and do a few things, like move around the house, and then I'd just be floored again. And it went on like that for about 8 or 9 months, and then I was told, well, you have some sort of like post-viral fatigue. They couldn't really explain it. Um, and yeah, so I did do like I suppose to think about like some of the treatments and things like that. I did do a course of like herbal medicine around that time, like when I was about 22, and that did give me some relief for a few months. But then it came back again. Do you know what I mean? Like with a
Yeah.
with a vengeance, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So the way it kind of progressed was like I like that I would keep getting sick, and this went on like 23, 24, 25, to my mid 20s. I would just get sick all the time, like it was just it was like I just kind of accepted it at that point. I was like, right, I don't know why this is. The doctors can't tell me why it is. I was told like basically, oh, you just seem to be susceptible. You know what I mean? But there was no kind of elaboration on that. Um, I went to different consultants, like I went to, somebody in urology, and then I went to kind of like say an osteopath because like I did have like a lot of chronic pain and things like that. But again, there was no concrete answer. It was, it could be this, it could be that. We don't really know. And then, it really impacted kind of every area really of my life. Because like at that stage, I was out of college, and like my life now, I'm in like the entertainment industry. I'm in filmmaking and acting and stuff. But like back then, I was in sales, like I was in corporate sales. So like it was a bit of a disaster really. Like I'd get a job and I'd be fine for a while, and then like I would start to get sick and it would become an issue. And to be fair, like I can understand that, like as in like an infection that would maybe knock somebody out for like a couple of days, would take me like 2 weeks to get over, or anything I would get, it would always be like 10 times worse. Like even when I get like say a sinus infection or something, like it would just be totally out of control. And like I'd see other people walking around and they'd be like, yeah, I've sinusitis, like it's horrible, but like, I just have to put up with it. And I'm like looking at them, I was like, but how come when I get that, I'm in bed for 2 weeks? Like, as in, I can't have any light, I can't have any noise, like I have swelling. Like, it's like, why is this happening? You know?
Yes.
Um, yeah, so that kind of went on, like that was say like, my mid 20s. Um, and then I suppose like the chronic pain really kind of started to kick in when I was around 26, I'd say like 27 was when I had all this like joint pain. Like during the night, I would literally wake up, I would jump out of my sleep. I'd be like, like I could have like a pain in my foot or like a pain in my shoulder or a pain in my neck, or it could be anything really. Um, so yeah, that kind of again couldn't really get an answer, didn't really know what was going on. And then eventually it got to it was actually the month then before my 30th birthday where everything really, really came to a head. Like, as in, I woke up one morning then, and yes, I'd been having chronic pain. Yes, I kept getting sick all the time. But then, like, I woke up this day and I was covered in a rash, and it was like an urticaria rash. So it was like big welts, like the hives.
Yep.
So it was kind of concentrated around my waist and mainly on my spine, actually. And then it started on like all of my joints on my face and then up onto my head, and like it was everywhere. And then I got like a form of arthritis after that in like every joint. Like, I mean, like my jaw, my shoulders, elbows, feet, hands, like everywhere. And I was really like, I did manage to get some medication and go back to work for a couple of months. And then I woke up one day and like I could barely walk. Like, I mean, I could just get from the bed to the toilet to the sofa, and like that was it. It was like everywhere, chronic pain. I could hardly move. um and that went on again. I did see consultants, I did see doctors. To be fair, I got a fibromyalgia diagnosis eventually. I did get a diagnosis of that. And then that was in 2018. So I was 30, nearly 31 then, when the kind of neurological symptoms started.
Mm.
So again, woke up one morning. These things seem to happen after a night's sleep. But yeah, I woke up then one morning and it was like my arms and legs, like I could hardly lift them. Like they literally felt like I'd weights on them. They just felt really, really heavy. Um, and then I started like twitching. Like my face kind of started twitching. Like my legs would just like kick out randomly. And even like my bite and like a choking kind of a sensation and things like this, like a lot of confusion. Um, just kind of mixed up and kind of slow. Like I studied English, so I've always been someone that's quite like articulate and creative and stuff like that. But it was like once the neuro stuff started, it was even like my vocabulary just went down to like nothing. Like I just felt like I couldn't even communicate properly. It was yeah, it was horrible. Um so anyway, went again. I got all these different tests done. Again, they couldn't really give me an answer. I got another diagnosis then of like a functional neurological disorder. So they were like, you have fibromyalgia and you have like functional neurological disorder. So they're like, there's something with your brain is not functioning correctly, but there's nothing structurally wrong.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, went home and then that was fine. Again, just for another few months, I had like medication and stuff like that. But I was very much living in, at that point, it was very much literally just like in a fog, like all the time. It was just like being in a shell, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't even like I was myself anymore. I just felt like I was essentially, it was like being it was kind of like being in a prison, you know,
Yes.
at times. So yeah, that went on for another few months, and then just by chance, my grandmother, Joan Maguire, she's now passed. She died in 2022, but it was in 2018, and it was probably around like September, October. Herself and my aunt saw a television show, on RTE, which is like the local Irish broadcaster. And lo and behold, uh, there was a whole show called like Living with Lyme.
Ah,
And it essentially said that like if you have symptoms, like if you have like say rheumatology plus neurology, you put the two together and you get an infectious disease. And yeah, there was a consultant. I'm not gonna name him. People probably know who he is, but there was a consultant anyway on that show, and he was saying like people are commonly misdiagnosed with say fibro and that functional neurological disorder, and actually when you put the two together, it's Lyme. So look, by that time, like you're talking 10 years of going from like Billy to Jack and being told it could be this, it could be that. We don't know, you know, a mixture of reactions. Like to be fair, like some doctors were great and they were trying to help, but they couldn't. There was others that were quite like dismissive or just didn't really know and didn't really want to kind of dig that much deeper. To be fair, it was mixed. Um, so my grandmother just rang me and she was like, Katie, she was like, you have Lyme disease. She was like, you need to go and see this consultant. And I was just like, oh, at that point, like I was so beat down. Like I didn't even want it. Like
yes.
I wish I could sit here, right, and say, oh yeah, I was, oh go, I was gonna kick this Lime's ass. It wasn't like that at all. Like it was just, I was just so skeptical at that point. I was just like, right. So anyway, thankfully, I had to. I also had to go privately to this guy because the public system at the time, I don't know if it's changed now in Ireland, but they didn't deal with like chronic Lyme. They would only deal with like acute.
Yes.
So I had to go privately to him, and they didn't do the testing here either. That's really sensitive and very, very specific. So I sent my blood to Germany. I got an appointment with him, and they basically said like he's not going to take you even unless he's bang on, like unless he kind of knows that's what it is. Like he's not someone who's just going to see a whole load of people and say, "Oh no, I don't know." So I went anyway, and he said, "Yeah, like the test, believe it or not, actually came back normal. They
Ah,
came back negative." And when I went in, anyway, he sat me down. He was like, forget about the tests. Like he was like, Lyme disease is actually a clinical diagnosis. And he said the
yes.
tests are there to support,
Yes.
but he said they don't paint an accurate picture. So he kind of explained to me that basically what happened was that I got infected with this like bacteria however many years ago. We think probably 2007, 2008. And once it was triggered and it was in my system for so long, like he said that your immune system was my immune system was completely obliterated. Like it was the same levels as, somebody maybe who was on like chemotherapy or something like that. Like it was totally suppressed.
Yes.
Um, so he said like that actually your body has kind of given up, like it's not going to create the things that show up in a test. But he said, I'm going to put you on antibiotic treatment for 3 months. I'm going to test you again. And he was like, I'm telling you, it's going to come up positive. And again, I was still a little bit like at that point, I was still very much on the fence. I was like, okay, I'll do it. And it was like three different types of antibiotics, like high doses at like different times during the day. Like, and then, he was very kind of holistic in his approach as well. I got like different supplements, other medications that were kind of more like I suppose like they were therapeutic, but and then some herbal stuff as well. And it was a combination of many different things. And he kind of had like a bundle essentially. Take this at this time, boom, 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 and like a whole regime. And I went back after the 3 months anyway, and lo and behold, yes, I tested positive.
Huh.
Um, yeah. And it was not just for like one particular strain, it was actually three different types of the Lyme, like the Borrelia.
Yes.
Um, and he said like, well, it detailed it anyway that like one of them is like a neuro, one of them goes to the soft tissues, and then the other one is it affects the bones, like cause
Mm,
arthritis and stuff.
yes.
So yeah, and then I did have again because of this, like it's a tick-borne illness, and it wasn't just the Lyme disease. Then obviously I had those three strains of Lyme, but I also had these other different, like this mycoplasma infection as well, that basically, like he was explaining, goes into the immune system cell and like smashes it from the inside out, you know? I was like, oh my goodness. Like I was like, so that's what's been going on in my body all these years. You know,
Yes,
it was, yeah, it was wonderful in one way to get the answer. And it really, really was. And he was explaining that like when you have low grade inflammation over a long, long, long period of time, like he said, even if you had like scans and bloods and everything done, it's not going to flag. It's not like, say, if you just went in and something happened yesterday and your inflammation has spiked, you know. So again, I suppose to do with the immune system and the kind of the suppression and stuff. So eventually, yeah, I got the answer, and thankfully I did do I responded very, very well to the antibiotics. Like I
great,
did. So I had 15 or 16 months of these like kind of high doses and chopping and changing at different times, supplements, and then some kind of like herbal supports as well. So like very much like a kind of a mix of things and approaches. Um and yeah, it made a lot of sense, you know, but at the same time it was kind of like wow, like as in 11 years of that. Whereas like I often thought like imagine if I had gone in that first day even, and if it had been on the radar, like, you know, there were times when I used to, especially when I was like really, really sick, you know, I used to often think like, what would the last 10 years have been like had it just been caught straight away? Because from what I hear, like a lot of people can pick this thing up, and once they get like the initial treatment, it's not a big deal. Like it's just a
yes,
bacterial infection at the end of the day, but it's when it's left, it goes through the whole body.
yes. Yes, very much
Mm,
so. And a lot of your words like resonate so well with me, and just that it basically turned you into a shell of a human. That's so much what I felt was like there was the lights were on, but nobody was home. Like there was no one in here anymore. It was just the shell of a human trying to exist in a space where it looked like other people were doing well. And I'm questioning like, how do they have kids? How do they take care of a house? How do they do that? Like I had zero energy. And so it's interesting to hear you also explain it that way. And just like I'm fascinated too in how you were able to I want people to understand like the immune system does not always catch this right away because again, sometimes your response to it isn't super strong, or maybe you've got other things that your immune system is working on, and so this registers low. And then I think once you start taking antibiotics or start taking treatment, it maybe agitates it or allows it to rise up a little bit more to the surface, if you will. That testing can
mm,
then pick it up. So that's also something that's interesting. I think people should pay a little bit more attention to. Um, and then I was talking to someone else when you had first started talking about not getting the bullseye rash. Someone had maybe suggested that's potentially when your immune system is like fully functioning and in very good shape and intact, maybe that's when you get a bullseye rash. And then if you
mm,
have some other things happening already in the body, again, it doesn't react that strongly to it, so you don't get the rash right away. And I'm not sure, but you're not alone in that. So many people have no idea really where they got bit, when they got bit at first, because you don't get that rash right away. And it is more of a slow, gradual decline into the dark abyss of being the shell of a human, and just
mm.
hearing your story and like how the symptoms started to progress and become worse. And that's something that I really want listeners to also be aware of, is that this isn't more time sensitive disease. All disease, you want to catch it as early as possible, clearly, to get it away with the least amount of effort required. But when Lyme goes undetected for long periods of time, it's a spirochete, it's a corkscrew shaped organism that then will begin burrowing further into the tissue. It can cross the blood-brain barrier. It can really disseminate through all organ systems in the body. And so I think for most people, sometimes people get a very acute case where it's like that person's super sick suddenly and then they catch it pretty fast because their symptoms are so strong at first. They must have got like a super salty tick, I don't know, super sick one. And then some other people, again, it's just like that slow decline, and then you really don't know. And actually, that's a question I have for you. I think about, because of that slow decline into unwellness, like you don't necessarily realize how sick you are, maybe until you even get well again. Would you say that's kind of like, I know that you knew you were sick and suffering, but like even for me, when I look back on all my symptoms, I'm like, holy cannoli, like I really was sick. It wasn't, when you're living it in the moment, it's like, yeah, something's wrong. I don't feel right. All these things are happening to me. But I just wonder for other people when they have things that are wrong with their body and like an arthritis thing or a swollen knee thing or whatever, and people are just like, that's age. But then you get better and you see that wasn't age at all. It was
Mm,
this sickness. And once you get it out of you, again, you can really gauge much more clearly how sick you really actually were.
yeah. Yeah. And it's, yeah, like, well, 100% I can relate to that because it's like when I was going through it, like you're just full on in. Now I still like look, I still do have some like lingering things.
Okay,
I can talk about them. Do you know what I mean? In
sure.
in a moment. But I mean when you're in the really, really thick of it, it's just like a day to day, like a survival mode, you know.
Yes.
And like I think that there is a part of you that doesn't fully actually go there, like as in mentally, that it doesn't go to actually how sick you really, really are.
Yes.
Um, and for me anyway, I can only speak from my own experience, but like it was a combination of like the attitudes of people around me, and then my own attitude then like towards myself as well. Do you know what I mean? So like I think there was a time where I was like, there's something wrong, there's something wrong, there's something wrong. And then, you go to so many doctors or you just have like people around you that you know or whatever, and they're like, oh, look, you look grand, you look fine, I'm sure you're grand, you'll be fine, da, 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 yeah, it can't be that bad, this kind of thing. Um, and like you kind of do adopt that. And, like talking about, say, training, right? And going to the gym and working out, okay? Like I even through all of that, I did not when I was very, very bad, but like say in my mid to early 20, well, mid 20s, say, until the time when I really got bad. But I still managed to kind of stay somewhat active, okay? But like again, like I used to go to like fitness classes and all of that, and I would do all that stuff, but like I wouldn't be able to sleep because like I'd get home and I was in so much pain, and then like the trainers that were running the classes were like, oh, you'll get used to it. As soon as you get used to it, you're going to feel fitter and stronger than you ever have. And like, I remember just constantly, like every day I would wake up and I would be in pain. Like, I mean, all over my body, like aches and pains. And then I would get up, I would start to move around. I'd feel kind of hungover, feel kind of sicky. And then I'd just be like, oh, well, everyone probably feels a bit like this, you know. And then I would look at people and like say people that are in the gym and people that were around me, like even in work and stuff like that. Let's call them like really high functioning individuals, like they can go to the gym every morning at 6 o'clock. They do like a 10-hour shift in work. They go home, they have a family, they have kids, they have activities, they have hobbies, they have everything, and they stay up late and they're absolutely fine. And I remember having a conversation with somebody before, and they were talking about having kids and a young family, and they were like, oh, you can just forget about sleep, like, and I was like, oh no. I was like, I can't, like, I was like, I can't function without sleep. And they were like, oh yeah, but you just do it. And I was like, no. Like, I was actually panicking. Not that I don't have kids or anything, but I was actually panicking at the thought of like, oh no, like imagine if I was to stay up really late and then have to get up really early. Like I can't, like the next day if I was to do that, like it's a write off. Like as in I had to go to bed at like 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock. just to be able to kind of be, and even at that, when I would get home from work, I would just have to go straight onto the couch and like lie there. And like, my husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, he used to be like, God, like, like, are you are you really that tired? And I'd be just like, oh God, yeah, I have to lie down. Like I'd come home, fair enough, I'd cook a bit of dinner, and then I would lie on the couch for like a good few hours, and then I would get into bed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it is weird, like, because when you're in it, I think you don't really realize, and it's not until you get better, and like until you get, for me anyway, until I got clearer again. Like
Yes.
whatever about, so like I still do have some chronic pain, okay? Because like with the neuropathic pain, it's tricky to kind of fully eradicate. Like there has been like some, say, like let's call it nerve damage, whatever we want to call it. So I do still have, and I do have like kind of like chronic migraine is kind of like a thing that I have now. I do take an injection for that, so like thankfully it's all really well controlled. But like when I think about that feeling of illness, it wasn't until I got better. And like even now, even though like yeah, okay, I have some pain or whatever, but like to be clear in my mind again, you know, like to be able to even like have a conversation like this, or like I know it doesn't seem like much, but for somebody like me that was always like a really big, I'm always been very kind of like outgoing. I'm like a people person. So like I charge my batteries by being in a room full of humans. Okay. It's
Yes.
just that, now I do love time to myself as well. But yeah, I definitely love like, and even down to like what I can do now, like I'm writing and all of that. Like there's no way, like when I was working, like even when I was working, and another thing I used to notice when I was working, I don't know if you can relate to this, and maybe others listening might, was that like I used to make a lot of mistakes, like a lot of mistakes, completely unintentionally. And it wasn't because I wasn't paying attention. It wasn't because, say, I was on my phone and I was typing up a document. It was not that. Like I would go through my work with like a fine tooth comb, and I would send it in, or I would submit something, or I would do a quote or whatever. And I would not all the time, but like a lot of the time it would come back and it would be like, that's wrong. And I'd be like, what do you mean? And like I know anyone can make a mistake, but like this was like a lot of mistakes. And like I'm actually, when it comes to my work and stuff, I am very like meticulous.
Yes.
Um Typos, okay, look, I always get someone to proofread, but like when it comes to like decision making and like being conscientious and stuff like that, like I'd be very much on the ball. Um, but I do remember that was another warning sign for me, because I had never really experienced that before, because this was now getting very close to when I was really about to kind of just explode or implode, whatever way. But like I did notice I was making a lot of mistakes in work, you know.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
that wouldn't surprise me. Like once it infiltrates your brain, which it sounds like yours definitely crossed the blood-brain
Mm,
barrier. I mean, your brain is inflamed, right? Like it's just like any other part of the body, it becomes infected, it's inflamed, and it really struggles to process things properly when it's inflamed, right? Like it's on fire, basically. I struggled a lot to remember people's names that I've known my entire life, word recall. I stuttered a lot. I was really very emotional. I don't know if that happened to you. I would cry all the time for nothing.
mm,
Just like I had Bartonella, so I don't know if that's Bart rage, but I would have anger issues, like just a lot of different emotional spectrum stuff. But it made thinking really hard. Like I gave up reading books because I couldn't remember what I was reading. I didn't watch TV because I couldn't remember the plot line. Like I'd be sitting there at a commercial and I would be like, what? I don't even know what I'm watching. Just like nothing
mm,
stuck in my head anymore. And so to function and to work was a challenge. I was so grateful for the GPS in the car because I could program at least where I was going and remember, like it could remember for me basically where I was going, because a lot of times I couldn't even hold those thoughts in my head about which direction I needed to go. And working was very, very hard. I remember taking meticulous notes, and that was the only way I could function and remember what my customers needed was just writing everything down and then going back at the end of the day and going through that list. Otherwise, forget it, forget it. I couldn't carry on conversations in the immediate moment to remember with people what we were talking about. Like what you say, like it would be very hard to have this kind of a conversation with you when I was still very sick because I would have to wait for you to talk to me to like remind me about what we were talking about so I could try to remember again to talk back to you. Like it was terrible. I mean, it really does relegate you to the like a shell of a human. Um, and so I'm really grateful that when you were telling me about your grandmother seeing that show, I was getting goosebumps through my body, and I was just very grateful that she was able to give you that gift in a sense. That's how I'm kind of looking at it. It's like she gave you that gift, like she knew that that's what was happening, and she was able to help you. And like, I'm just really happy that that happened for you because, I also can relate. Like a lot of people, a lot of people choose to leave this earth when they're sick with this because it just is day in and day out with no answer, no end in sight. And there were many times that I thought about checking out. I didn't want to be here. And I think you had said if you had had a gun and um, someone actually, you did say that if you had a gun, correct?
No, I didn't.
Oh, sorry. For whatever reason, it sounded like you said if you had had a gun at one point, and I was like, oh, all right, she's being pretty frank about this. Um, someone did give me a gun in the middle of it all. He did not know I was sick. He gave it to me for protection. It was one of my ex-boyfriends, and
Mhm,
I remember when he told me he was sending it to me, and I was like, oh no, because he didn't know. I didn't tell anyone after so long because doctors just kept telling you there's nothing wrong with you. So like, well, what do you tell people? You just sort of give up, you know? But when he told me
mhm,
that, my hands started sweating and I was like, oh man, I really hope this isn't the end of me because I kind of was thinking that that
mhm,
could have been very easily used to just end it because it was awful. And no
mhm,
human should have to go through that. And, you think about what you did to get yourself better. I mean, that took another year and a half of your life at a minimum, because I'm sure you're probably still working on
mhm,
different tweaks and things to continue to help yourself elevate out of that. But like, to have to pulse that many antibiotics, to go through all that, the different herbs, the different treatments, the different payments, the different costs that we incur as people, it just shouldn't be. And I'm kind of encouraged to see that things are shifting. I feel like the dialogue is changing a little bit. I mean, a lot more people are starting to become, unfortunately, infected with it. In the United States, they say maybe 400 to 600,000 people a year. I don't know actually what the statistics are worldwide. But I think, like in Ireland, I think you had an organization, Ireland TikTok, is that correct?
yeah,
That kind of helped to give you a little bit more guidance there. So there are different grassroots organizations, if you will, that are coming together across the globe to help people to deal with this a little bit more concisely. I think in Australia, they don't even acknowledge its existence. And that's really, in my opinion, a crime against humanity because I've talked to far too many people. I've been in this space now for years, as have you. And you understand that this is definitely something that exists and it needs to be acknowledged because it's taxing on so many different levels as a society.
yeah,
We want healthy individuals. We want healthy citizens that can contribute, that can help to strengthen our nations and our countries and our globe ultimately. And if people are so sick that they can't even get out of bed, they can't think, they can't remember their words, they can't function, like that's not really that good for society on a beneficial level altogether. And a lot of people are getting put into that space. But then, I remember at one point when I took antibiotics for like 2.5 years, and someone was like, you should really save that for a time when you're really sick. And I was like, you want I'm saving my life right now. This is hopefully the sickest that I will ever be ever again in my entire existence. And so this is the time, unfortunately, that I need to execute my get out of jail free card, if you will, and take the antibiotics. I don't know. I go back and forth now with the whole antibiotic treatment, but for me, it helped. Sounds like for you it helped, but also we both were doing like herbal protocols and some other things, some holistic healings, um, to
mm,
to assist that. And that's also something I want people to be aware of is that you can do both. You don't have to go one or the other. You don't have to do herbs or antibiotics. actually they work best, I think, in tandem. And, especially in an early on an infection, antibiotics I think are very much more effective. Um, but the herbs will just heighten what the antibiotics are there to do or help to protect the body or allow some beneficial things as well. Because antibiotics are great in a sense, but they do only know one space flight mission. And so their job is to kill, right? They just come in and kill. And they kill a lot of things, not just the things that they're there to kill, but sometimes beneficial bacteria and other things in the body. So you just want to be mindful about that. But I do think I wouldn't be as far along as I am in my own healing without having taken them. And it sounds like
Mm.
for you, that would probably be the same as well. Um, and I
Yeah.
think I've learned a lot about Germany. And so when you sent your blood work there, um, I heard that they could pretty much tell you what kind of tick and where the tick was from that you were bitten with, just because their knowledge is that much more extensive. Did you find that with the German side of things, or it was just a simple thing that you just done a test and it really wasn't much more past that?
Um, I didn't look to find out that information.
Okay.
Uh, now this was in 2019, so potentially it could be uh like since then maybe. Do you know what I mean? Like that's included
Yeah,
in the testing. I
sure.
don't know. I'm not sure, but I would imagine so because like, I kind of I got a very, very comprehensive test. They do a couple of different kind of tiers.
Yeah,
But like someone just said to me, look, the fact that you've been like this for so long, just get the top tier and
yeah,
have done with it. Because they said if he suspects there's that else going on, he's gonna send you back for more anyway.
yeah,
So you know, they said, and I'm glad that I did, because it just meant that everything could be just kind of dealt with like straight away.
yes,
Um but like just what you were saying there as well, like and about like healing and you know all of that, like it's it is, I think, for something like this, especially when it goes on so long, like there's so much more to getting better than just a treatment, you know. So like for me anyway, I had to make some like pretty big lifestyle changes, you
yes,
know. Like
yes,
I had to reduce stress. I had to, quite frankly, I had to also step away from relationships that were not serving me at
yes,
all. Do you know what I mean?
yes,
Because like again, the people that you're around and like what you're hearing and what you're being told and people's behaviors and whatever. Um, there's I just think like there's so much to it. Like, it's not just a case of you have an infection, we need to get rid of the infection. Yeah, but also in order to, for me anyway, in my experience, to be able to actually deal with it and give yourself the time to actually just rest. And like it's really hard to do. It's really, really hard to do. And I think as well, when you've put up with something for so long and you've kind of functioned, 50% capacity or even 30% capacity, and you've managed to get through, it, it's for me, it was one of the hardest things actually to make that decision. And like even like I'm kind of laughing about it now. Like, look, humor, a lot of humor, the Irish humor helps with, dealing and talking about like difficult things, dealing with and talking about difficult things. But I can have a little bit of a giggle about it now because it was so long ago. But like even when I became really bad, like as in when I woke up that day and I couldn't walk and I had to go sick from work. Like it actually, from that point, it took me like 3 months to hand in my notice and leave. Like as in I was sick and I was like, oh, I don't want to hand in my notice. I don't want to hand in my notice, because like I had just been promoted to like branch manager of this particular
Oh,
franchise and stuff. Um, and like I did have like I had a company car and I had like, a good salary and all of this, and I was like, I didn't want, there was a lot of like, oh, maybe next week, maybe next week, maybe next month. And then as the weeks went on, it was kind of like, oh, and it was kind of like I had to then, pull the plug
Yeah.
and just, take the run and jump off the cliff and deal with this issue now, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, it took a lot to kind of do that because like I wasn't sacked, Uh, but yeah, I did. I had to kind of make the call, and I sat on it for a while. Whereas, like, if this was anybody else, okay, and if they were coming to me and they're like, I haven't been well for years, and like now I can't walk, or I can barely walk, I'd be like, right, well, you need to just. I put myself through this weird little hell for like 12 weeks
Yeah.
of like the pressure, obviously, from them because they're like, well, we need a manager, like, as in, do we have you as a manager? Like, are you coming back? Are you not? Like, do we need to get somebody else? Do we need to get temp? Do we need to completely, because I don't know what the story is in the States, but like, as far as I know, like European employment law, anyway, they can't, like, if you're sick, they can't actually promote, like, they can't put someone else into your position.
Okay.
Like they kind of have to leave it open so they can let someone go in as like temporary cover, but they can't, like, there's a whole thing. So like it's just funny because again, the things that we do to ourselves, are sometimes worse than like anything anyone else could ever do to it.
Yes.
Uh, so yeah, I think like a lot of changes. Like I did also learn, I think that maybe we've talked about this before, but like I did learn TM, like transcendental meditation.
Yes. Yes.
Uh and I'm trying to think of when did I actually learn that? I think I learned that probably around like 20 2019, maybe something
Okay.
like that, maybe 2018. I can't really remember, but it was sometime around then, like when I was pretty when I was pretty sick. And yeah, I found that really, really helped. Because I think it was actually giving my brain like healing, like as in genuine actual rest and like my full central nervous system. Because I had been kind of working with like a therapist and a kind of a mindfulness kind of coach. But the mindfulness for me just wasn't really my thing. Like I liked the idea of like a mantra that you could just tap into and you're thinking about that and that's what it is.
Yes.
So I found that really, really helpful. And then, when I had the antibiotics done and I had all that done and I had done some herbal, that was when I actually learned about like Ayurveda.
Aha.
Uh, so this is how it came about because the guy that I learned the TM from, um, like it was part of the community there, and they would have like different workshops and informational talks and things. And that was how I learned about like the Ayurveda. And I was kind of like, you know what? The TM has served me so well. I think I'm gonna give this a go. So because after all the antibiotics, I did have a lot of like gut health issues and stuff.
Yeah.
And I really felt like, I got with this Ayurvedic doctor then and we did a protocol for like another, I think it was probably like another 6 months or something. But like when I say like a complete overhaul and like, I mean, like that really, like I know one of the things you had mentioned, like when did you know you were going to get better?
Yeah.
And it was during that, it was during this Ayurveda protocol that we did. It was like an at-home panchakarma.
Yes.
And yeah, it was really interesting because kind of halfway through that, I don't know what happened. Like all I know is that I just had this overwhelming feeling and knowing that like I was going to get better. And not only was I going to get better, I was going to be better than I had ever been before. Like as in it was almost like this kind of like almost like a rebirth, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
Like it was definitely like an experience. Um and I think like when you're fasting and things like that anyway, it can kind of bring a lot up to the surface. So yeah, that for me was definitely a moment where I just knew, and like I'm 100 times better than I was. Like I still have to manage certain things. Like I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, I'm completely cured, because like I'm not, and that would be it wouldn't be right, you know. Like I still have to make sure that if I'm definitely still prone to chronic fatigue. So like if I
Okay.
don't actively plan out things and make sure that I'm getting, sleep and food and rest and water and, meditations and all these little things to help, um, I will crash,
Yes.
definitely. And the same with like the chronic pain. Like I kind of have to just go with that. Like if I do have a really, really bad day, okay, I can take that day, I can rest, and if I
Yes.
do have to do something that day, yeah, I'll do the best that I can, but I'll also accept that I do have a little bit of a limitation, and that's fine. But
Yes.
like I would still say that like the quality of the life or the type of life that I'm living now, especially in the creative space, it's just night and day, even to what my life was before. Don't get me wrong, like I really enjoyed the sales, and I still do enjoy sales. And obviously, there's an element of that with storytelling. I do think there's an element of sales to that too.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, I do feel like there's times where it'll just hit me. I'm like, whoa, I'm like, my life is so awesome right now, and so kind of like full. And yeah, it's really, really great, you know?
Yeah, that's beautiful. And if we could, in just the last few minutes that we have together, if you
Mm.
don't mind, can you just talk a little bit about what you're doing now and your recent film, and just so that viewers can find you and watch that if they'd like, please.
Yeah, so at the moment, I've written a short film and it's called Warrior.
Hmm.
And the reason it's called Warrior is because that's what my grandmother used to call me.
Aw.
Because she kind of always knew, like I think she always could see that I was just putting on a front, but I was, inside I was struggling with actually being sick. So she used to call me like, there's the little warrior. But it's basically it's a short film, and it's about a girl called Jenny who has like some sort of a chronic invisible illness for like over a span of 10 years. So like there's a lot of kind of parallels with my own story. Um it's not directly kind of a Lyme disease film, so to speak. Like it doesn't label this illness. But like, all of those symptoms are kind of like they do show up with like various different autoimmune diseases and stuff.
Okay.
Um, and it's really what it's about. It's it's really about what it's like to live with an undiagnosed chronic condition, because I feel like that was the biggest thing, the biggest hurdle actually was not the illness. It was the fact that I didn't have an answer. I didn't know what it was.
Thank
Because
you.
as soon as I got a diagnosis, like the amount of people, like the attitude changed completely. Like, as in it was like, oh my God, I've heard of that. Or even if they hadn't, they'd be like, what is that? Whereas when you're saying to somebody like, I'm sick again, it's like, all right, you're sick again. Do you know? Different.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's very much about that. It's about how she's kind of viewed in society. It shows every area of her life that it impacts, like her friends, like her family life, work, college. It's very, very transparent, you know, and I'm hopeful that, through this film, people will become aware, especially those, well, the ones who are suffering will know they're not alone, hopefully,
Yes.
in their fight, but also the people around them, that they'll need to, just be aware that if someone is saying they feel something, or somebody is presenting as ill or struggling with like daily stuff or struggling with their job, or they're keeping us up on top of like their college work, that just because they don't have an actual answer as to why, that it's still real, and like they're still going through it.
Yes. What a beautiful
So
message. And I know that that just came out maybe within the last 3 months. Has it been
yeah,
longer than that?
we're actually, yeah, no, it's not out just yet.
Oh,
We're
why did
just
I think
kind
it?
of,
I thought you had a
yeah.
release for it like a month ago. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, do you know what that was? That was our fundraiser. Like we had a fundraising party, because
Thank
we're
you.
still in like the fundraising phase. But no, we're shooting. We're going to start shooting in November, and it will be ready. I would say spring like 2025. If you want like to stay with updates and things like that, if you want to get in touch, it's Warrior Short Film, just all one word on Instagram.
Yes.
Or myself, like Katie J Maguire. Um, yeah, and like you can follow along there. And like that's kind of the plan, like, is to really to kind of raise awareness, with this film. Like, look, it's drama. It's not a documentary. Like, it's still a story in and of itself, and it's
Yes.
going to be kind of quite a heavy hitting kind of drama.
Yes.
Um, very, very grounded, very realistic, this kind of thing. But um, yeah, I think it's a story that kind of it needs to be told, and it was interesting because when I started to kind of talk to people, even when I was on set and stuff, and I would mention that I had been sick, and the amount of people that were like, "Oh my God, I went through something similar," or this happened to me, or this happened to my friend, or my cousin, or my brother, or my parents. And that kind of spurred me on then to like actually write it and take action on it, because when we're in it, we think sometimes it feels like we're the only one,
That's
but
right.
like we're really, really not. Like there's
That's right.
just millions, I would say, going through this on a daily basis.
Yes. Well, I love that because I think that that was more of the hard time for me when I had unanswered health challenges, right? Like no one could tell me what was wrong with me. And you start to feel like a crazy person. I really had issues with God. I was furious with God. I couldn't even go to church. I would cry and I would like beg and plead, like, why me? I can hardly function as a human. But I didn't talk to people about it again because all the doctors kept telling me there's nothing wrong with me. All my tests, everything supposedly looked fine. Deep down inside, I knew I was dying, but you start to sound like a crazy person and you can really lose your mind a little bit being constantly told there's nothing wrong with you, but you know that there really is something
Mm,
systemically problematic. And it's a very lonely space to exist in and very just it's like lonely and sad and dark, right? And so what a good light that you're shining on something that's really important topic um is maybe that period of time again where people just really don't know what's wrong with their body, but there is something wrong. People don't understand it. They
mm.
have the attitude of like, "Oh, you're sick again," like, meh. But it's like, "No, dude, something's really wrong. There is a really big
Yeah.
problem." And I'm kind of glad for you that people's attitude shifted once they figured out when once you realized that it was Lyme. I think still sometimes people don't quite grasp that diagnosis either and really
Mm,
what that looks like for people. But I know there are people who are going through cancer that actively state Lyme was way worse and dealing with it was way worse than the whole cancer thing. But again, you kind of outwardly look okay and your appearance is good and people tell you, oh, you're
mm,
fine, it's going to go away. And you just sort of live in that space of just constantly kind of encouraging yourself to keep going forward day in and day out, even though it is a constant struggle to survive. You're really living in that space of survival. And how do I get food in my body today? Okay, I've got to find a way to do some laundry or oh, I've got to do my dishes. I got to clean up it's like
mm,
it's really hard to motivate yourself when you're there. So,
mm,
and I apologize. I thought the film already came out, but I knew that I wasn't able to see it. Like I didn't know if it was like getting put out further for the rest of the public people to see it soon or what was happening. So, thank you for clarifying that point. I really look forward to seeing it. Um, and again, you can follow Katie on social media. I've been doing such, and um, I'm just very inspired by you and just your fortitude and your strength to continue to go forward. And again, to touch on something that is such an intangible or like not a black and white topic, right? It's not such a clear
yeah,
delineated thing when people are existing in that space.
yeah. And the film really does look at that as well, like in the sense of like even the attitudes of people around, like there's no, I'll put it this way, like all of the characters, like even including the main one, they're all a little bit gray in the sense that, it's not to vilify anybody, it's not to kind of, it's just, I feel like it's a very accurate depiction, and then
Yeah.
everyone has their own kind of issue as to why they might be in a bit, they're being dismissive, or why they're. So there's a few different kind of like layers to it and things like that. And I think it is, I think the biggest thing that I would say though is that for anyone that's like going through it right now is to kind of try and trust yourself a little bit more, and not to get sucked into what you're hearing, because that definitely hindered me. Like as in, listening to other people around you, even if they're a professional or like a medical professional and stuff like that, like not every single doctor, unfortunately, will have the expertise and stuff to kind of cover this particular area. It's very, very
Yes.
specific.
Yes.
Like as are all of the different kind of chronic illnesses,
That's right. That's right.
and then obviously the people around you as well. Like they might mean well by saying, look, you're not that bad. Get your clothes on, we're going out. But, I think just trying to trust ourselves a little bit more
Yes.
and having that little bit more of like advocating for yourself as well, you know.
Have to. Absolutely
Yeah.
have to. And so then just as a final question, can you share with me what has been the best thing that's happened to you as a result of getting Lyme and tick-borne illness?
Oh God. Um, I would say I'd say probably there's kind of like two things. So like one of them is the new kind of level of understanding and like kind of compassion and awareness that I have now. Uh yes, towards other people, but also like mostly towards myself, you know. Like as in I care a lot more about myself now. Like I'm not willing to put myself in situations maybe over and over again that before I may have. So I do feel like in a weird way it has kind of opened me up to me a lot more, if that makes sense.
Very much so.
Um and then like yeah, obviously knowing what I've been through, if somebody even says to me now, like, oh, I was really sick, or I'm going through this, or I have this, chronic pain thing, or I have whatever. Like obviously I have a better understanding of that, because if there was anybody who had like, I mean, zero, like zero, because like I was never sick, you know, like before I got sick, like I would have been the very one that'd be like, there's nothing wrong with them. Like, come on, we're going out, like life of the party, it's all grand, whatever. So, yeah, so like definitely that. And then 100% like the work that I'm doing now, and like being able to kind of create. And it's funny as well, just I know I'm conscious of the time, but like when I was sick, like one of the first things that I did actually was like pick up a paintbrush and start painting. And like I hadn't painted in years. Like I hadn't painted in like 12 or 13 years. And I just started painting all of these pictures,
Wow.
like, so it was weird, like that being really, really ill and like having everything come to like a grinding halt, and just it just opened up this whole other space for me. And I do feel like to fully express myself now as I want to be, instead of maybe as I think I need to be, if that
Yes.
makes sense.
Yes.
So I don't know. A little bit of a journey of self-discovery as well. So that's always good.
Yes. But it's a beautiful thing, and it's kind of realigned and redirected and put you in a new space and pushed you obviously through some challenges that maybe you would never expect or sign up for in the first place, but you've survived and gotten through, and you've now again made complete 180 within the self, and your lifestyle changes, and just the better space that you've been able to create with yourself, relationship, and I mean all of those things are beautiful conquests. And that's really, I think, truly the story of like an amazing human, right? Is just the ability to survive, to like get through things, to persevere, to find self at the end of the journey. Is what a blessing and what a beautiful thing. Like that's just like an epic hero saga that you're going through, and it's beautiful, and I love it. And I'm so excited to see where things go for you yet, and that you can look again back in a space where you can create and think and do beautiful work and art and share again is fabulous. And just even being here with me to be able to talk and to share your story is phenomenal. And people don't quite understand it, that you don't get it till you get it, but the amount of um power we regain and the different perspective that we can have going through this is just phenomenal. And so I'm really grateful for you to be able to share that back with others too. And you could go through this and keep it to yourself, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I think it's even more beautiful when you go through something like this and you hit rock bottom, and then you can come back and share with others to help them to see things differently, to have a different perspective, and hopefully save them from having to go to rock bottom, to have empathy for others, to see their situation in a different perspective, to give a little bit more space and grace for those who are struggling. Because when you're there in that space, you don't even necessarily, again, acknowledge that you're as sick as you are. And from an outside perspective, it's a lot easier to see that, and to judge that. But it's one thing to judge it harshly, but it's another beautiful human gift when we can judge those things more with empathy and, again, grace and space. And I think through what you've gone through and what you're sharing and putting out into the universe, you allow a lot more people to gain that perspective. So thank you for that. It's huge. And the more that we can share kindness and love and show others just to have a soft heart, it just makes this world a better space. There's plenty of other things that are not in that energy out there. And so we must create that, be the change we want to see, is really where I'm coming back at, is with Gandhi, right? Be the change that we want to see. And that's exactly what you're doing. And I applaud you for that. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Anne.
Yes,
I'm
this
right
has been
back
a
at
lot of
you.
fun. I really look forward to this, sharing this with everyone, because I know, as always, with every episode, these words find the right people and will encourage and inspire and give those who are walking the hard walk right now strength and hope to continue to persevere. Thank you for being with me today, Katie.
Thanks for having me, Anne.